The township of Leongatha sits in a stretch of rolling farmland in rural Victoria. It is a quiet, isolated landscape, defined by green hills and small, tight-knit communities. On July 29, 2023, an extended family gathered for a weekend lunch at a private home. To those involved, it appeared to be a perfectly ordinary meal. But within hours of finishing the meal, 4 of the guests became critically ill. Their symptoms were severe enough to require immediate, life-saving medical intervention. 3 of those guests later died. The 4th survived, but only after months of intensive medical care. Examining the home, police found a setting that lacked the typical indicators of a crime. No signs of a struggle, no forced entry, and no physical weapons left behind. The absence of traditional physical evidence forced investigators to look past the visible scene, beginning an inquiry that would become one of Australia's most complex murder trials. At the hospital, the medical findings pointed to a specific toxin, one rarely encountered in cases of standard food spoilage or common domestic bacteria. Specialists identified the suspected source as the death cap mushroom, a highly lethal fungus. While initially mimicking a common stomach bug, this toxin actively targets and destroys cells in the liver and kidneys. This destruction creates a gap of several hours between ingestion and the first appearance of critical symptoms. Because of the specific nature of the toxin and the circumstances of the meal, Victoria Police officially transitioned the matter into a homicide investigation. Detectives faced a significant hurdle. Because the meal had been eaten, the primary evidence, the mushrooms themselves, had been consumed, leaving no physical material to test directly in the kitchen. With the physical evidence now biologically destroyed, police moved their focus toward tracking the data and decisions that led up to the lunch. Forensic teams executed search warrants at the property, shifting their focus away from the dining room and toward the household's electronics. Investigators began a hunt for digital footprints, looking for records of searches, purchases, or movements that occurred in the days before the guests arrived. By extracting GPS data and timestamps from mobile devices, investigators mapped movements with geographic precision. Comparing this footprint to interview transcripts revealed points of friction, places where a device's recorded location contradicted a verbal account. This allowed detectives to isolate the specific actions taken in the days preceding the lunch, building a minute-by-minute reconstruction of the week. As the timeline became clearer to police, news helicopters and journalists descended on the town, bringing the case under intense public scrutiny. The mounting data from these electronic records began to narrow the investigation, focusing on the specific timeline that preceded the meal. The case demonstrated that while a physical room can be restored, the electronic record of a device's movement remains much harder to erase. The findings of the digital and medical investigation eventually moved to the Supreme Court of Victoria. Prosecutors built their case around the reconstructed timeline and the specific nature of the medical findings, arguing that these patterns demonstrated clear intent. The defense focused on the circumstantial nature of the data, arguing that digital pings and medical timelines were not enough to prove what actually happened in the private setting of a home. Following the legal proceedings, the court moved to resolve the charges of murder and attempted murder according to the jury's final determination. The finality of the legal outcome stands in sharp contrast to the ordinary, domestic setting where the events first unfolded. Ultimately, the case highlights how modern forensic science has evolved. Even when physical weapons are absent, the combination of biological and digital data provides a way to reconstruct what happened behind closed doors.